the Triathlon Show 322. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of that Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and on today's episode I interview Associate Professor Dustin Joubert of Stephen F. Austin State University, where we will discuss his study comparing 7 carbon-plated so-called super shoes, and also even more shoes than that, because Dr. Joubert has been doing informal testing in his lab on a regular basis, which we will discuss as well. Some fun stuff as well as serious stuff in among those tests. So by the end of this interview, you will have a very good idea of which shoes you should go for if you want to give yourself the best likelihood of gaining the most possible benefits from a pair of super shoes. So that's a very clear benefit of listening to this episode. Good actionable information. But before we get into the interview, big thanks to our sponsors, Roka. Roka produce exceptional quality triathlon wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins, goggles, performance sunglasses, as well as prescription eyeglasses and sunglasses. Today, let's talk about Roka's range of wetsuits and why they are such a fantastic option. First, they have a wide variety of products, from the entry-level Maverick that is still extremely high quality, all the way up to the flagship wetsuit model, the Maverick X2. All of Roka's wetsuits come with the patented arms-up technology, which maximizes shoulder mobility, which can otherwise be quite restricted when swimming in a wetsuit and result in less efficient and slower swimming. That is not the case when you're in a Roka wetsuit. They also have patented buoyancy profiles for the fastest possible body position in the water. And if you're somebody that are really struggling with body position, then consider getting the MX Max Buoyancy wetsuit, because that's the most buoyant wetsuit of them all. And it's actually a quite affordable option as well. There are a ton of other fantastic features in Roka's wetsuits, like the exoskeleton in the X2 wetsuit that maximizes speed and propulsion through the connection between your hips and shoulders. You can read all of the details on Roka.com, and remember, you can get 20% off your entire Roka order by visiting Roka.com/TTS. And thank you to Zen8. The Zen8 indoor swim trainer is a one-of-a-kind swim bench that helps you improve your technique through an early catch, maximize propulsion through a more powerful stroke, and stay consistent by doing swim workouts at home even when you can't go to the pool. It is available in the UK, the EU, and the US, with free shipping in both the UK and the US. It is very affordable, similar to a pair of regular good running shoes, not a pair of super shoes. It is actually much cheaper than a pair of super shoes. But best of all, the investment is completely risk-free, because if you're not in love with the Zen8 swim trainer after 2 weeks of using it and using the free training program that comes with it, then you can send it back and get a full refund. Learn more and get a 20% discount on your Zen8 swim trainer on zen8swimtrainer.com/TTS. Now, just a quick mention before the interview that we are in the very final stages of accepting participants for our training camp on Mallorca from the 26th of March to the 2nd of April this year, 2022. I will discuss this a little bit more after the interview, but just note that now is the last chance to sign up, as we are about to close the doors on registrations. All right, now without any further ado, let's get into the interview with Associate Professor Dustin Joubert. Welcome to That Triathlon Show, Dustin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. It will be really interesting to get into your specialty topic, shoes. And but before we do that, can you please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a bit more about your background and how you got into what you're doing now?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Dustin Joubert. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology and Health Science at Stephen F. Austin State University. We're located in Texas, and I have a PhD in exercise physiology from Texas A&M. And I've been a runner all my life, and yeah, so I've always had an interest in endurance performance, and more recently started looking at running economy and some of these new shoes.
Perfect. And first, let's start by describing how these new shoes, if you might call them super shoes, some people refer to them as carbon plated shoes, even though whether the carbon plate is what makes the difference is something we might get into later. How do they differ from traditional racing shoes typically, and what are really the design parameters that are important there in the difference?
Yeah, so I think it's been interesting kind of looking at the recent lit that's come out in terms of the terminology that the scientific community has embraced for the shoes, because in the lay public, we kind of call them super shoes, and that might mean a variety of things, but kind of pinpointing what are the technical characteristics that make a shoe a super shoe or not. I think it hasn't really been totally nailed down. I think commonalities are probably higher stack foam, so more highly cushioned shoes, probably with more advanced foam that's more compliant and resilient. It's got the potential to store and return more energy. The presence of a carbon fiber plate to kind of increase longitudinal bending stiffness and probably provide some stability to that higher stacked foam. And then I think the other thing is, people are using them at a high level to race, right? So looking at what the elites or competitive runners are wearing on the roads. So I think those are probably the unifying characteristics I see, at least.
Yeah, and probably also price. So we might call them price issues as well.
Yeah. I think, the market has probably done that. I don't know if that necessarily makes the shoe super or not, though.
That's true. Well, what are the purported benefits of these shoes, and also the mechanisms behind those benefits?
Yeah, so if you go back to the original 2018 Hochhammer paper on the Vaporfly prototype that showed the 4% benefit in running economy, that was really kind of the groundbreaking study that showed the benefits of the Nike Vaporfly shoe, primarily from it being more compliant and resilient, the midsole foam, being able to return more energy, store more energy, decreasing the energy cost of running and improving economy. So if it's easier to run at a given speed, you could therefore run at a faster speed, working at the same physiological intensity and improve performance. And so that was the big benefit that was initially shown in that 2018 study.
Yeah, running economy being improved there, and that's something that you have replicated now with other shoes, as we will get into. And for the listeners, Walter Hochhammer is a past guest of the podcast. We interviewed him in, I can't remember which episode, but we'll put that in the show notes as well. Other than his study, before you did your study, what other data exists out there in terms of published literature? Is there much there, or has it been basically Hochhammer's paper and now yours?
No, there's a handful now. It's definitely in its infancy, but there's definitely been some follow-up studies that have confirmed their findings. So that initial Hochhammer paper, that was kind of Nike supported, and people are, there's no reason to not trust those researchers. Those are world-class researchers who did that project. But the fact that it was kind of Nike backed, people had some reservations, but that's been proven consistently by independent labs. Now there was the Barnes and Kilding paper that showed similar range of improvement, 3 to 4%. The Hunters group out of BYU, similarly are in 3% range. So where the exact percentages have varied a little bit in the lit, definitely the consistent improvement. But the thing that you notice is that it's all the Nike Vaporfly line of shoes that's been studied. And so all these other companies that have come to market with a super shoe of their own haven't been compared, haven't been established even at all in their own right in the lit, much less been compared to the previously established Nike shoes. Yeah.
And that's probably one of the reasons that you did your study, or I know it is because I read it. But what are the other reasons for behind you wanting to do your study, which involved several different shoes from different brands?
Yeah, I think that was the main impetus, is just we have this one shoe that's been shown to be great, and obviously a lot of people are running in that shoe and running fast in that shoe. But all these other companies have come to market now with a so-called super shoe of their own, and yet they haven't been validated or compared. And so it was really just take a very applied look and see if the sort of landscape has been leveled across the competitive running shoe market. Personally, I had run in the Hoka Carbon X, and I tested myself in the lab, just a little self-experimentation, and it hadn't given me any benefit compared to just a normal racing flat. And so when I purchased the Alpha Fly and did the same test on myself, I was a 4% plus responder in terms of economy improvements. And so that was kind of eye-opening of there's definitely some shoes that are helping and some that probably aren't, and something in between. And so we just tried to get our hands on as many shoes as possible that kind of meet that definition we talked about of super shoe, that's being sold as that and raced in that by elites and competitive athletes, and make a broad comparison.
Yeah. No, that's really good that you did get a look at the competitive landscape and see what you could find about whether it was level or not. So let's go through that study. I will of course put a link to it in the show notes so listeners can go and have a more in-depth look. But let's start with which shoes did you involve in this study? Yeah,
so we got as many shoes as we can. We got an internal grant. So we didn't have any funding from any shoe companies or anything, but we had an internal grant from the university, and we were able to get 7 of the carbon-plated super shoes and 1 traditional shoe. So we tested the Hoka Rocket X, the Saucony Endorphin Pro, the original, the Nike Alpha Fly, ASICS Metaspeed Sky, Nike Vaporfly Next Percent 2, New Balance RC Elite, the Brooks Hyperion Elite 2, and then our control shoe, or sort of our traditional shoe, was a standard racing flat, which was the ASICS Hyperspeed.
Got it. And what was the participant group like?
Yeah, so we wanted to test at 16 kilometers per hour, which, for my US units, that's like 6-minute mile pace.
It's around 350 per kilometer, I believe, 350.
Yeah, so that's probably the most commonly tested speed in the previous lit. And so we wanted to test at 16 kilometers per hour for that sake. To do that, for running economy testing, since we're measuring energy expenditure from strictly the aerobic component, the oxygen consumption component of energy expenditure, we need people to be working at aerobic intensities where they're not at such a high intensity that anaerobic metabolism plays a large contribution. So you need people fairly fit so that they're not stressed too much at that intensity. So basically you need them below their lactate threshold at those speeds. And so the qualification criteria was around like, you need to be able to run 5K under 17:30. So not really fast guys, but competitive runners. We had a mix of like current collegiate guys and, mid 30 marathon type guys. So we ended up with 12 runners that met that criteria. So that would be kind of general demographic that we had.
Yeah, these were all male runners.
Yeah. We had limited funding, so to do these shoe studies, it's tough because of not everyone wears the same shoe size, and so we were only had shoes in 10, 10.5, and 11. And so based on the budget we had, that was kind of like the peak number of people we can get with a convenient sample around here. So it was definitely tough. I'm in like rural East Texas, and we're a couple hours away, 2-3 hours away from many of the major like population cities. And so to recruit, people that meet those criteria within a couple hour radiuses here was a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And then what was the testing protocol like, and the procedure that you put the runners through to measure these shoes? Yeah, so for the economy testing, pretty common is a 5-minute rep. So if I have you steady state at a set speed that's aerobic for you for 5 minutes, I can capture your oxygen consumption, your CO2 production, and determine your energy expenditure through indirect calorimetry that way. But it takes 2-3 minutes to reach like a true steady state. So if we have you on a 5-minute stage, we can capture the last couple minutes of that energy expenditure and oxygen consumption to determine the energy cost of that task. And so we did, since we had 8 shoes, we did 8 5-minute reps with each subject. So every subject wore all the shoes once on the first visit in a random order. So they did 8 5-minute reps at that 16 kilometers per hour. You're given a 5-minute break between to change shoes and to just keep the protocol from being very taxing. So you're kind of starting at resting levels between each rep. So to make sure we didn't have any like effect of the test sequence,
we had them come back a second visit and they tested the shoes again, just in the reverse order of what they had done the first time. And so then we were able to get the average across those 2 visits and compare their oxygen consumption, energy cost across the different shoes in the study.
Got it. And then so what results did you find? How did the shoes fare in this test?
Yeah, so the big thing with the analysis is just looking at sort of like what's the percent benefit relative to the traditional control shoe. Did the shoes help relative to the control shoe or the traditional shoe? And then also, did they match up to the previously established Nike Vaporfly line of shoes? And what we saw is that, some shoes were good, some were okay, some didn't help so much. And so when we looked at sort of the top tier, we expected the Nike Vaporfly and the Nike Alphafly, kind of a similar technology in that shoe, to perform at a high level. And we saw that around 3% economy improvements. So similar to what's been shown in the previous lit. The one shoe that had matched up to the Nike shoes was the Asics Metaspeed Sky. So that was, that shoe hadn't been tested. None of the shoes other than the Vaporfly line had been tested. So that shoe leveled up with similar improvement statistically. And there was sort of a mid-tier that were better than the control shoe, but not quite as good as the Nike shoes, that top tier shoes. That was the Saucony Endorphin Pro and the New Balance RC Elite that were around 1.5% economy improvements. And then on the lower tier, shoes that didn't have any statistical benefit relative to the control or traditional shoe were the Hoka Rocket X and the Brooks Hyperion Elite 2.
Yeah. One thing that you note in the discussion, I believe, is that astute listeners will have noticed the Adidas version of their super shoe is not included here. So, but that's something that we'll get to in a little bit, maybe with some case study data that you've done later on. That's a good summary of the results. So it looks like the shoes that performed the best were the 2 Nike lines of shoes and then the Asics shoe. And they clearly outperformed the others. What about and that I should say on an average level? But that leads me to the next question: were there any large individual differences and or responders and non-responders, if you want to call them that?
Yeah, so I think that's been of interest in all of these papers that have looked at running economy and the new shoes. And most of these studies have been designed to really make conclusions about like, is this shoe better than a traditional shoe, and not really designed to like weed out the individual difference. So we did see, if we just broke our data down by the like highest responders, like the top 6 responders in the study and the bottom 6 responders to those top 3 shoes, that probably the biggest thing that jumps out and makes sense is that the people who respond more, that get more benefit from the shoes, were the ones who were less economical to begin with. So it's like they've got more margin to make up. Maybe their legs and Achilles tendons and feet are not springy as the others, and so the shoes are giving them more benefit in that regard. And that kind of makes sense. We tried to look at some of the mechanical differences, but with when you're starting to compare these groups now, you're comparing 6 people to another 6 people. It's not really big data set for making those types of comparisons. So I'm probably less confident in like making any strong conclusions on our mechanics data there. We did see that those people who tended to be less efficient, less economical to begin with, who got bigger gains, tended to be the people with like slower cadences, a little more vertical oscillation. But I don't know if that's the reason they're less economical to begin with, or if that's the reason that they tend to have. I would say the other thing I would say on the individual responsiveness is, I always tend to clarify this, is that people have said like, oh, well, it's all individual, like which shoe is best for you, and to some extent, yes, that's true. But to the extent of like the statistical conclusions that we made to say these are the top 3 shoes, we couldn't make those statistical conclusions if that wasn't the case for just about everybody in the study. Yeah. So one of those top 3 shoes that we listed was the best shoe for everyone. In fact, that was probably like the top 3 shoes for just about everyone when you look at the data from the individual responses. So where you see more individuality is like among those top shoes that are similar to each other. Some people might be a 5% responder in the Alphafly, and another person might only be a 1% responder in the Alphafly. And so it's more like the magnitude of the response for those top shoes where you see the individuality.
Yeah, got it. And I think that's really useful and practical information from a consumer standpoint to know that okay, well, basically everybody had one of those three shoes as their top three, and that's kind of, it makes sense to narrow your search if you're in the market for shoes, probably to those three based on the data that we have today. So other than that, is there anything else you want to kind of summarize from this study? And in addition to that, what are the areas for future research that you see that you want to highlight that you didn't get to do in this study?
Yeah, so I think, it's tough keeping up with the running shoe market. Academic research is never going to be a perfect solution for trying to keep up with the running shoe market, because they can release a new shoe every 6 to 8 months. And, with this study, if you just, there's recent iterations of these shoes. Some companies are about to release their third iteration of the shoe that we were testing the first version of. And so it's tough to keep up in that regard. I think there is a place for academic research, and when new shoes are developed and come to market with, updated technologies to help validate whether or not they're actually helping or not, or if they're helping relative to previously established shoes. So I think that's definitely a place for ongoing academic research. I've got some interest in trying to weed out some of that responsiveness, individual responsiveness data. If individuals' mechanics maybe lend themselves to bigger responses or not. But those will take some studies like designed around that. There's been, even since we released the preprint of this study, there's been 2 new shoe papers that have been published looking at running uphill and downhill, how the benefits are maybe slightly less there, but still substantial. There's a new paper out on a new unnamed Nike prototype on it helping economy, even when you've got significant more muscle damage. Economies, the benefits are still there with the new shoe. So definitely, I think this is an area of research that's going to keep expanding. I imagine over the next year, there'd be a lot of papers that probably COVID slowed things down and for a lot of labs. And so I imagine there'll be a lot of new research coming.
Yeah. Everybody was writing reviews, and now it's possible to get people into the lab again.
Yeah, well, that was one benefit of being in Texas. We had a little bit less restrictions, so we were able to collect a lot of data still.
And so we'll get into some of the sort of private testing that you've done, or the case studies in a little bit. But regarding the selection of the shoes, just if you give your tips in your own words to listeners of this show, whether they be triathletes or runners, what would you say? What is the advice to the consumer here when it comes to selecting shoes?
Yeah, so I think, in the conclusions of our paper, we make the suggestion that, maybe you should be a little wary of purchasing shoes that haven't been tested. New shoes that haven't been tested or compared to like these established shoes, or shoes that are in our lineup currently that have shown to be inferior, right? You might be at a performance disadvantage running in those shoes. And then that's delimited to like the type of runner we looked at, the paces we looked at. But I definitely think that there's some shoes on the market that aren't going to give you the same competitive advantage as the top ones that we showed here. I think when new shoes come out, it's a little trickier. It's, if a new shoe comes out and there's updates and it hasn't been looked at in the academic lit, well, then what do you do? I think there is room in exercise science and in sports testing facilities to start marketing and promoting, pushing running economy testing more with the new shoes. Endurance athletes who are willing to spend money on lab-based exercise testing have always considered, paying for VO2 max testing and lactate threshold testing. And economy testing uses the same equipment as the VO2 max testing. And so any lab that's capable of doing that is capable of doing economy testing. And so it makes sense to me for both labs and consumers that have access to that, are willing to spend money on that to actually do that type of testing themselves. And then, N equals 1 data when you're the one is the only data that really matters. And so if you could take a couple pair of shoes into the lab and test yourself, that gives you all the answers you need right there.
Yeah, no, that was something I was thinking about when reading your paper, that especially for elite athletes, when you're really looking for that 1%, then it might be worth it. Just get all of these top shoes, get them into a lab, and do an economy test with each of them. Maybe as you did it in the study on if you really want to do it right, 2 separate days, randomized order, and then reverse the order to really make sure you get it right.
You can get it all done in one day.
Yeah, if you want to get all of the benefits, then your own N=1 testing is probably the best way to go. But beyond that, as you say, just choosing one of these tested, proven shoes is probably a good starting point.
Yeah.
So one thing that when we talk about these performance benefits of economy, and this is something we have discussed before, and we did discuss that with Wouter when he was on the show, but it's been a long time ago, so I'm going to ask you to remind us all, how does running economy relate to performance? And because it's not necessarily as straightforward as just, 3% economy means 3% better performance.
Yeah. So being more economical means that you take less energy or less oxygen to run at a given speed. But the big benefit is not so much that's like you save 100 calories in a marathon. That's nice. But the big benefit is that then you could work at the same physiological intensity and run at a faster speed. And so the question then is like, if you 3% more economical, what percent faster are you able to run? It's not, like you said, not perfectly 1-to-1. At slower speeds, probably like 7-minute mile pace and slower, it probably is pretty close to like a 1-to-1 relationship from the modeling and data that I've seen. At faster speeds, you start looking at like elite marathoners, it's probably more like 2/3 is like a simpler rule of thumb to follow. So a 3% economy improvement for an elite marathoner might translate to like a 2% running speed improvement and performance time improvement. There's a cool paper from Shalea Kip, Cram, and Hochhammer that's got an actual like calculator that goes with it. You can plug your numbers into a little Excel calculator based on your paces you run and the distances you're running and your percent economy improvements, and it'll spit out an actual time value for you. So yeah.
I remember linking to that in that episode with Wouter, so I'll look it up again and put it in the show notes for this one too. It is a cool Excel and really easy to use, user friendly, so it doesn't take any rocket science. You just plug in your numbers and that's that. But it's nice to just get an idea of, okay, if I, let's say, improve my economy by 3% based on your own speed over a certain distance, which might be a marathon or a 5K, get a bit of an idea of how many minutes or seconds you're saving in the end. And then some follow-up questions based on the testing that you are now doing personally. And let's plug your Instagram account here, which is LabRat Rundown. Really cool account, well worth a follow, where you do different tests and post other stuff around shoes and running economy and so on. So now you have, and these tests you typically do only on yourself, I believe, but you have tested, for example, the Adidas Adios Pro that were missing from the study, and compare them to both the Nike shoes, Nike Alphafly, I think, and a control shoe. So what did you find in your N=1 testing with the Adidas shoes?
Yeah, so yeah, that LabRat Rundown Instagram account is meant to be kind of fun and share some objective data. Instagram is full of subjective shoe review data, or shoe review opinions, I should say. So that's been fun. But yeah, I tested on myself, the Adios Pro 2. We didn't intentionally omit that from our larger study. Just at the time that we obtained all the shoes, we weren't able to get that shoe. It was sold out between the 1s and the 2s being released, and so. I didn't do great in that shoe. I'm a big responder to the Alphafly. I'm like a 4.5% guy in the Alphafly, and I'm usually like a percentage point or so less in the Vaporfly, and then I was even like a percentage point even worse in the Adios Pro. So I didn't get along great with that shoe, but I can't make broader conclusions for that. I really wish we had it in our testing lineup. Obviously, there's a lot of elites that are running really fast in that shoe, but without more data, we can't really say much more than that.
No. Still a 2.5% or so improvement over the control shoe is not.
Yeah,
bad.
that's. So, I think when I do some of my personal testing, it's like if I'm always 4% in the Alphafly, but another shoe gives me. I don't think I was quite 2% in that one, but there's some day-to-day variability. But if another shoe is giving me 2.5%, 2% improvement, that's still substantial. Like I just have a better option on the table.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just for fun, you also tested running in Crocs. How did that go?
It's funny. I did a lot of work on the Adios Pro testing, and then the Crocs one was much more popular, I think. Yeah. Well, so there's there's one runner. I think he's in Utah here in the U.S. who's run some crazy fast times, like sub 15-minute 5K, 106 half, something like that in Crocs, and so yeah, I tested my economy in Crocs, and I'm definitely not. I don't run well in Crocs. I think I was about 8% worse in the Crocs than the Alpha Fly.
Yeah, 8% worse than the Alpha Fly, or that.
Yeah, and then I think 4% worse in the control shoe, 8% worse than the Alpha Fly.
Yeah, and actually that's that's one of the reasons that I put this question in, because I thought it was quite interesting to see the kind of the symmetry there, that just as much better or just as much worse as the Crocs are compared to control, that's how much better the Alpha Flies are for you than the control. Where kind of intuitively, I would at least think that the Crocs, that's got to be like a league of its own in like just poor economy, like not
well,
really made for running.
I mean, 4% worse than a traditional racing flat's probably a pretty big impairment for me, but
yeah.
I think my tip to anyone racing in Crocs is to probably have thicker socks. I think that was one of my challenges.
Yeah. No, of course it is a massive impairment, but the point that I'm making is that the Alpha Fly for you is as big of an improvement.
Yeah.
It's not a marginal gain at all. It's like a very significant gain.
Yeah.
And then you for track running, now there are the Nike Dragonflies as well. So and you did some work with them as well, and comparing them to potentially using Alpha Fly or Vaporflies on the track in races where that might be allowed. So what did you find?
Yeah, so I would first point back towards that Barnes and Kilding paper. That was one of the follow-up Vaporfly studies that confirmed the 3 or 4% economy benefits. One of the things they had done in that paper, though, was actually compare not just to a traditional road racing shoe, but also to a like distance track spike. Now this was that was pre Dragonfly, Super Foam, and the spikes. That was just the Nike Matumbo. But they showed even that the heavier Vaporfly was more economical than the really light distance racing track spike. And so one of the things that they kind of recommended from that paper was that maybe track runners should consider at least the possibility of running, in the Vaporfly or these higher stack shoes in track races. And of course, since World Athletics has banned, 25 millimeter stack height and above for track races, but NCAA athletics here in the States don't have any stack height regulations on the track. And so that was kind of my thought, is it seems like a lot more NCAA runners probably could be benefiting from even with the new foam and the Dragonfly, but it being limited in stack, they might be able to benefit from the higher stack road racing shoes. And so yeah, that was my kind of personal testing sample I did, was on the Alpha Fly being my best shoe I know, to the Dragonfly. And I was, I think, 4% or so, my usual in the Alpha Fly, and maybe around upper 2s, 3% in the Dragonfly. So the Dragonfly still helped me a lot compared to like a traditional flat. But despite its heavy weight, the Alpha Fly was still the most economical shoe for me. So for me personally, even when I go down to shorter distances, I'm going to run in that shoe because it's my most economical shoe. I think, being that we can only test running economy at more aerobic speeds, really we can't really go faster than like 10K pace. It's got to be slower than that. So it's a little harder to say, okay, well, I tested at 5:45 pace, but how is this going to help me at 5-minute pace? And what are the trade-offs on the turns on the track, or trying to sprint and get up to really maximal speeds? Is there some trade-off in like traction? So it's harder to do that without more probably like time trial data, but I definitely have an interest in doing some more, actually probably larger scale stuff there.
Yeah. Well, those are all quite important considerations, so that you point out there, and maybe limitations that to using or reasons that the Dragonfly or track spike might still be the better choice, but still really interesting to see that there is that difference in favor of the Alpha Fly in economy. Just out of curiosity, when you test a spike, can you just test that normally on the treadmill, or do you have to kind of change the belt to some special kind of belt on the treadmill? How does that work?
Yeah, so the one of the treadmills we've got in the lab is the Woodway, which has got these like rubber slats on the belt, and so those actually handle the spikes really well. We feel totally natural on it.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, traditional treadmill belt, hard deck, that might be a problem.
Yeah. Okay, and then one other question. You mentioned already one of the newer papers that has been released around uphill and downhill running. So can you talk us through a little bit around what they found and what happens when running uphill and downhill to the economy benefits?
Yeah, so that paper was from Whiting, Hochhammer, and Crom, and they showed they had people at a fixed speed. I think it was 13 kilometers per hour in that study. And they replicated their kind of 3.8%, nearly 4% economy improvements on the flats. And this was in the Vaporfly 4% shoe. But when they put them at a 5% incline, which I think was meant to kind of replicate the Boston type marathon hills, they put them at a 5% incline. That improvement in economy was reduced to closer to like 2.8-ish, maybe a little under 3%. And same thing downhill, there was a slight reduction. And so still very beneficial, just not as beneficial as on the flats.
Yeah. It would be interesting to know what would have happened if they had maybe even like clamped the oxygen uptake, the physiological effort, and then somehow calculated the total energy expenditure or a rolling course with including the flats, the hills, and the uphills and downhills. Because in the real world, in a road race, you would maybe not have a completely fixed energy output, but try to pace yourself over those hills rather than maintain a specific speed.
Right. Yeah, they chose to fix speed, which means so for the testing on the flats, that was like considerably easier effort, or downhill considerably easier effort for their subjects. But to be able to keep them below threshold on that 5% incline, that's why they needed the 13 kph. Yeah. So when I actually compared the Alpha Fly to the Vaporfly on myself going uphill up a 5% incline, because I was curious to know if maybe the heavier Alpha Fly becomes more of a penalty running uphill. And also would be able to see like the decrement. And I did do that. I tried to match metabolic intensity to like run at similar VO2s. So it's like for, what did I do? 615 mile pace or something on the flats was like 730 something on the uphill. And so it was similar oxygen consumption levels, but I saw similar what they saw when I looked at that on myself. I had, went from 4% to 2-ish% or so, 2.5%. Going uphill. Yeah. But it wasn't, for me personally, that gap between the Alpha Fly and the Vaporfly was closed. So normally I have about a percentage margin on the Alpha Fly being better for me. That was basically eliminated with the Vaporfly. So maybe there's something to that lighter shoe uphill, but yeah, definitely, we can talk around the minutia and split hairs on that. The shoe's still beneficial uphill and downhill.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So then, I think that's all the shoe stuff covered from my side. Or do you have anything else that you think would be interesting? Anything else to point out that we haven't talked about yet?
No, I think we hit on a lot of the big papers in the science, and like I said, I think there'll be a lot more coming out. We're doing a follow-up study right now. The slowest speed these have really been tested at, like when matched in mass to another shoe, is that most recent paper at 13 kilometers per hour. But most of the stuff previously has been like 14 kph and faster, which is like 3-hour marathoners and faster, is where most of the data is. And so we're actually looking, obviously there's a lot of people who are slower than 3-hour marathoners who are buying these shoes. So we're looking at for 3:30 to 4-hour plus marathoners, what are the percent economy benefits? And we've got, hoping to wrap that project up, the data collection on it this month.
Oh, that will be really interesting. And listeners, just follow Dustin on Instagram, LabRat Rundown, and I'm sure that once the study is wrapped up, which of course will take a while, there will be information there about it. But in the meantime, I'm sure there will be some interesting additional tests that you will be doing and posting about. It's, as I said, well worth a follow. So other than the shoes, then, I'll just ask you as a runner, if you could give 3 pieces of advice to other runners or endurance athletes that want to improve their performance, what would that be? Can be anything related to endurance sports and running.
Okay. Yeah. I'm always wary of giving others advice. So
you can tell us if you want to frame it like 3 things that you think works well for you. That's also.
Or I'll give my advice to my 20-year-old self that I should have followed maybe. So I think consistency is king. I previously collegiate runner, was injured all the time, and you don't see any improvements or benefits long term when that's the case. So I've learned now consistency is more important than anything. I probably, in my running prime would have focused more on strength. That was, for me personally, my body type would have benefited from that. So I'd probably spend a little more time in the weight room. Maybe I wouldn't have thought as much.
Yeah.
I think I was, I've always been an academic and kind of a student of my sport, but in some ways that when it comes to the psychological aspect of racing, sometimes you can overthink things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep it simple, stupid. That's probably, and all the science that's in wearable tech and numbers and quantitative stuff you can get out there. I think keep it simple, stupid is probably good advice.
Yeah. Great. And then let's just take the rapid fire questions. So take one sentence to answer each of these. And the first one is, what's your favorite book or resource related to endurance sports, running, or science?
It's kind of old school sports science, running performance, coaching blend of things. I'm a Daniel's running formula fan. Yeah,
that's a good one. And what's an important habit that you've benefited from athletically, professionally, or personally?
Oh, that's a tougher one. I'll go personal, which has helped professional and academic. So I quit drinking alcohol a couple of years ago, and for me that was a big benefit for productivity in a variety of areas. So
yeah. And finally, who's somebody that you look up to or that has inspired you?
So the whole reason I became an exercise science major as an undergrad was I met Arthur Lydiard. When he was doing a speaking tour in the U.S. And it was actually right before he passed, the day before he passed, he was doing a speaking tour in the U.S. And that kind of changed my mindset and career outlook. And that was big. Yeah. That must have been great. Definitely one of the all-time greats in running. Just finally, just remind the listeners your Instagram, and are there any other places they should follow you, or is Instagram the one place to go? Yeah, I'm just on Instagram now. I was been scared of social media forever, so Instagram has been a leap for me these last couple of months. But we got some fun stuff we're about to test. I'm about to retest my Alpha Flies that have over 400 kilometers on them compared against a new pair. And so some people have wondered about the durability or how long the foam and the benefits last. So I think that's a really important one, actually, because kind of the things that you can read on forums and stuff is that at least, and this I think was even from the original Vaporfly 4%, that they got 200 kilometers on them, and then you got to get a new pair, and if they last 400 kilometers rather than 200 kilometers, that's basically half the price per kilometer. So I think in most of the shoe studies that are doing those comparisons want to make sure that the shoes aren't worn, so they're less than 20K on them. So that people don't have that as a question. But I tested them at 200K and they were just as good as new. And 400K, they're a little uglier, but I can tell you based on feel, I'm confident they're still probably giving me 4% benefit. So I'm going to run those into the ground and keep doing that as they up their mileage. Yeah, well, that's an exciting prospect to look forward to when you do that test. All right, but thank you so much, Dustin. It's been great to have you on. Thank you for sharing all this information, and good luck with the study and the start of the data collection. Absolutely. Thanks a lot. I hope that you enjoyed that interview. As always, you can find the show notes on scientifictriathlon.com, and we'll have plenty of links, including the link to the preprint of the Super Shoe study, as well as another relevant study by Dr. Joubert. We will also have links to the interview that I did back in the day with Wouter Högkammer that we mentioned in this episode. And we also mentioned the Excel spreadsheet that in that discussion around running economy and how that translates to performance. So that's a great spreadsheet that you can use to actually calculate, okay, so if I improve my economy by 4%, how much does my
marathon time actually improve by depending on how fast you are, because that makes a big difference. So check out all of those links. There's plenty of useful stuff there. And as we discussed in the interview already, I really recommend following Dustin on Instagram at Labret Rundown. He has great content there and keeps coming up with really good and interesting tests to perform in his lab. Now, let me talk just a little bit more about the final stage of registrations for the Scientific Triathlon Mallorca training camp from the 26th of March to the 2nd of April this year, 2022. We have just a handful of slots available, and that is at the time of recording this outro, which is a bit before the episode is released. So hopefully we still have a couple of slots left when you hear this, but really this is the last call if you're interested in participating. Definitely after the end of this week, when this episode goes out, we will not be accepting any more registrations. So just a few short things if you're interested. First of all, read more about the camp and how it will work on our website on scientifictriathlon.com/camp. And you can also find the link directly in the main menu bar. And you can then contact me directly if you're interested in registering to see if there's still availability, and we can discuss that. My email is michael@scientifictriathlon.com. It's going to be a fantastic camp, so if you're hesitating, stop hesitating and just go for it. Next Monday on the podcast, I interview Adam Kieran, and we will discuss all about chain lubrication, friction, and saving a significant number of watts without any training, and saving money from the reduced wear and tear on your drivetrain by doing chain lubrication properly. It is an exciting episode, so stay tuned for that. And big thanks to our sponsors, Roka, that you can find on roka.com. Check out their wetsuits, tri-suits, swimskins, goggles, and exceptional sunglasses and prescription glasses for everything from day-to-day wear to extreme action sports. Use the promo code that you can get on roka.com/TTS to get 20% off your entire Roka order. And thank you to Zen8. Use the Zen8 swim trainer to improve your technique, power, stamina, and most importantly, your swim training consistency. Get 20% off your order on the swim trainer with the promo code that you can get on zen8swimtrainer.com/TTS. And don't forget that it's a risk-free investment. If you don't love it after 2 weeks, send it back and you'll get a full refund. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.